Good Monday. This is Jay Brew, co-chairman of Seafried and Brew. Looking at, which we talked about last week, the 3-month state coincident index, which is produced out of the Federal Reserve in Philadelphia. When we look at a GDP in here of 2.8%, it makes sense based upon what kind of growth we saw around our nation. And we've pointed out that as we look back is that in that particular 3-month look back period, we had 2 states that had negative net growth. We had a number of states that moved into the dark green category, the light green category, which are all growth factors. So when we look at the 6-month forecast, which we said would be coming out this past week, is that we see green and blue throughout the entire nation. The blue is growth at excess of 4.5%. And you notice it's coming out of Michigan. Relate that to total car sales in here, moving up into that 14.75 million level. Relate the unemployment level, moving to 8.3%. Once again, we keep talking about the fact that our unemployment is really centered here in this part of the country and in this part of the country. And you can see that we have dark greens and blues throughout this entire area. When we look at the overall index, is that it's moved up in here from last month, from 1.6 to 1.8, which is saying that this growth is continuing to build. And so when we look at that unemployment number, a lot of people questioning 8.3% and the increase in non-farms. My feeling is, based upon the 6-month situation, we're going to see the unemployment rate continue to decline. And the thing to point out, which Dr. Ed did when we did our special ALCO meeting broadcast this past week, and we went over what the Fed projections are, is that we're way ahead right now on unemployment based upon where the Fed actually saw unemployment all the way out to 2013. So this is a very good sign, but a lot of people sit there questioning these numbers from the standpoint, are they good numbers? Or there's something in these numbers that isn't indicating a drop in unemployment, and that's why I come back to these charts and why we want to look at these on a monthly basis, because these are giving us a clear sign that we could be seeing economic growth in that 3 to 4% area as we come through the first quarter, along with it a decline in unemployment. What does this mean? Well, I think it's good for the stock markets overall. It's been my anticipation that we should start to see the 10-year rate lifting itself up in here. But that's been a mix back and forth between European fears and what our economy is going to do. Well, the economy keeps chugging in behind this. The 10-year Treasury declined in here when they heard that GDP was only 2.8%, where the street was expecting 3%. Well, my feeling is that we're going to continue to get good economic numbers continually coming out, which takes care of that U.S. economic piece. The thing is Europe, and that is still on the line and still putting pressure on that 10-year area. But based upon this kind of economy, I still say that this represents that we should be moving up towards that 3% level on the 10-year based on this kind of economic growth. Another thing I wanted to chat about, I had the great pleasure of hearing Guy Williams from Gulf Coast Bank down in New Orleans talking about his experience with Katrina. And as a director, I had a number of takeaways from that talk. And many of you may have heard Guy speak at various conventions, etc. Once again, the stories are startling, what he went through, not only as a citizen down there, but also as a community banker, and the things he learned. So I wanted to point out a couple of things, because this also touched my experience too. One of the things that he urged banks to do is to look at putting those little plastic Ziploc bags into the vaults. And when we think of that, is that vaults are not waterproof. I had that experience when Hurricane Irene came up in the mid-'80s up into the Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania area, and I helped in terms of emptying out safety deposit boxes that were just filled with muddy water. So when he mentions this, it's not just if you're in a flood zone or whatever. This is really if there's any chance, say under fire or something like that, that they're shooting water hoses into the vaults to put out a fire in the bank, that could produce the same sort of trouble. So just this kind of piece of information. It's a disaster recovery type situation, but I think as a safety measure that to have those Ziploc bags in your vaults, offer them to customers, urge the customers to put their valuables inside these bags, that would have protected so much. And a number of us have had that experience. So when we look at another thing that was very important is that looking at a rendezvous point. And he said that this was probably one of the most valuable things is that they had set up with their senior management team a rendezvous point where they would all meet. Because in a situation like Katrina, no cell phones, communications completely down, so that they knew a place to be able to go to be able to meet with the management team and to put things back in order again. Another one that he felt was very important is to have just an email site, like on Google, that everyone has the password for. It could be Yahoo, Google, one of those. And that most likely if all communications are down, that still there may be internet access in even disaster type areas. And they found that this was also valuable in terms of communicating when they had no cell phones and other methods of communication, because they did find sites to be able to basically access those private email accounts. So when we think about this and some of these hard-learned lessons, is that Guy did just a magnificent job in terms of talking about disaster recovery when disaster strikes and knocks out all of your disaster recovery plans. And just some of these simple things can help so much in terms of turning what they did as a disaster down under Katrina in New Orleans into a very positive experience for his community bank and its future growth and viability. This is Jay Brew, co-chairman of Seyfried and Brew. Have a good week.